a greener, imagining a greener, fairer world. I think that's really important. But also being, being savvy, being shrewd and really incisive about what we do together.
So I thank you, Penny. I just wanted to say, Johnson, I'm intrigued whether you found generational change when working with families and how they approach imagination. Many times I've encountered grandparents and older generation wanting the future to give like they do and to fund what they do, and they don't necessarily know how to even relate within the family to change and to different priorities, and how do we create that sort of common language of values. I always say there's different types of heads. There's the numbers people and there's the words people. And so the number of people you go to with a project and the budget doesn't make any sense. It doesn't relate to what the words are. And I always say the budget is an educational tool. Make sure your numbers relate to your words. So the numbers people can think. But I'm wondering, do you find, Johnson, there's a change between different generations, how they're approaching this?
I find that the pattern is consistent in that the younger generation would always talk about change and bring in new ideas, but they are never the decision makers. And by the time they are the decision makers, what we say is that their interests are aligned with whatever they're thinking. And as in, once they are the decision makers, their interests are no longer what their interests were in the past. And again, this is a very practical matter that one has to realize is when you are, let's say when you are advising the family and telling them about all these new changes and ideas in the world, that's one thing. But when you're appointed as the enforcer and protector of a trust, and you are the director of the distribution committee, you then realize that you have responsibility, but worse, you have liability for making wrong choices. And as such, very quickly, you conform to what the old ways are. So I see a very consistent pattern where people have good ideas, they rise to a point where they are actually now in control, and they quickly revert to the old ways of their parents. And they become, let's say, less, they become much more practical about the world. And they know that if they make wrong decisions, their position in the family, if this is a big family, will be challenged. They can be, all these things you see in the TV show like Succession happens in some extent to many of these families, as well as in foundations, where gatekeepers' incentives are just their job, and their job is to make sure that all the things they do are minimum risk. So if you ask them to fund a very imaginative but new project, there is no upside for them if this works, but there's maximum downside for them if this leads to some reputational issue or leads to some damage. So as such, they would act accordingly too. I think the concept of thinking in terms of people's incentives, and not what they say, but what they do, what the true incentives are, is very, very useful in any space, especially our space, because a lot of people will say a lot of things, right? And especially in philanthropy and charities, will say a lot of things, but really you might investigate and do diligence and realize that they are actually saying their interest is really about their position is being challenged by a colleague, and they just need to defend that position. And that's really, it boils down to it. None of the other stuff really matters. And I find this all the time. I find this to be the case all the time.
Johnson, I super interesting. I wanted to react, to have your intuition or an experience on my intuition. For a reason that escaped my understanding, there is fewer women in power than men. And yet, among the people that have helped the place that we have built, the LearningPlanet Institute, it's a vast majority of women among the people in power. Okay, so I wondered if there is a gender difference in what you're describing. And we know, for instance, Mackenzie Scott versus Jeff Bezos, very different attitudes to money and philanthropy, as one archetypal example that I guess everyone knows here. And I don't know if you've seen this elsewhere. So that's the first point. The second point is there have been interesting psychological experiments that have shown that the best way to change an adult is to talk to the kids and have the kids talk to the parents. And that's even more true when it's a daughter talking to her dad. Okay. And so I was wondering, if this sorts of family power structure that you're describing, are evolving under, the new generation's needs and expectations and the gender balance that it's not, fortunately, what it used to be, very male-dominated in the past decades and centuries.
If you'll allow me, I will jump in with a woman's voice at this point. I think Rakiba, a lot of hands are up right now, but Rakiba, you had wanted to rebound on some of these things. And then we'll go to, I don't remember between Ariel, Noah, and Jordan, which hand went up first. So if the two of you would like to decide amongst yourselves. But if we could hear from Rakiba on some of these points, because I think you had quite a few points to make.
Yeah, I'm happy to chime in. And Johnson, on your first points and second points, right? So just putting some data out there, there's an $81 trillion wealth transfer happening between now and the next 10 years, 84 globally and 41 within the United States. It really matters on who's shaping that conversation around those wealth transfers. Number one, within the United States, there are organizations such as Resource Generation, Solid Air, and others who are the millennial inheritors that are having, that are at the forefront of decision making, of not doing things the way their parents and generations have done it, G5, G7, the Rockefellers, the Fords. I mean, case example of how philanthropy can change over centuries is the Ford Foundation. If you're looking at an entity in itself, well, why the Ford Foundation was created, the values with which it was created, it wasn't until the last 5 years that even a family member of a Ford sits on the foundation of a $17 billion endowment, right? All that to say, I think newer generations, generational differences, yes, but anytime individuals come in with the thought, courage, determination, tenacity, to even question, can we do it differently? Can we think about it differently? Can we approach it differently and reverse engineer how to have the data behind our fiduciary duty and minimizing risk and generating return, whether it's for investments or social return and whether it's a grant? I think that's when radical things have happened, right? Not to harp on Ford again, but for example, documentary films are having a moment, right? So Ava DuVernay's Origin, a $38 million project that was risky by all means from traditional investment side, was actually come together by philanthropists who deemed it necessary to think about what is caste, what is race, what does economic justice mean in the context, and to fund it to the tune of $38 million in a very expeditious way where the film came about. So it's that, again, I use the word courage so deliberately, that you need to be able to even be open to thinking about, how do we want to do it differently? What data do we want to reverse engineer into it? And how do we fuel R&D for something like imagination? If we can fuel R&D for Uber and WeWork to blow literally over a weekend, I think we can do it for our sector, for social enterprises. And it really begins with the facilitative experiences of not only funder mandates, but listening to the communities and how it comes together in the Golden Triangle, in a listening, leaning in, and learning journey that most of these folks on this call have used in talking about it.
That's I love the term deliberate courage, Rakiba. But I'd like to pick up on a thread around incentives and talk about imagination and incentives, because I think that's what actually is the key to unlocking new forms of funding. But it's the thing that traps us because what are we trapped by? We're trapped by a really narrow framing of what incentivizes action, whether it's rent or profit motives. And what has been really exciting to work in the Web3 space on has been the way that people are really using new technologies to rethink what incentives mean. And, you know, an example of this that I often cite is, like, why on earth is a dead tree in the form of wood more valuable than a live tree in the current system? It's because we attribute value to that process, right? And so if we can see value as being much greater than financial value, but if we can see value as being human and natural, then we can actually start to attribute the value that it really deserves, and we have the tools to be able to do that through these emerging technologies. So the thing that makes me really excited here is that we can use our imagination to rethink these incentives, to be able to break out of this trap of feeling like you have to defend your position because it's just too risky based on a very narrow financial sort of risk. And I think linked to that is this form of imagination asymmetry that we see playing out again and again, where those who have the money don't really need to do as much work to imagine the other side of what life is really like, as opposed to those who don't have the money, who want the money, who are doing an enormous amount of imaginative labor to be able to really understand this, like, very, very complex funding system and to act on certain terms. And so that's exhausting, and I think it keeps people sort of like working really hard but not making any progress. And I guess maybe just to end this reflection on, to go back to something that Erman said about, are we all social innovators? Yes. I think we're born as social innovators as human. And I think it's really hard for a lot of people, probably 99% of people on the planet, who are constantly either hungry or having violence committed against them, or are poor, or a combination of all of those factors. So to me, being able to provide some basic necessities to unlock that social entrepreneurship and to unlock that imaginative potential that's inherent in all of us, I think is really key. So I'll pass it over. And Arielua, I think you're next. Over to you.
Yes, thank you so much. And I just want to really drop a few thoughts on what Johnson had said about young people wanting something right now, and when they all get to the position of, like, when they grow older, when they get to certain positions where they have much more responsibility, it feels like their wants and needs changes because they have to conform to the system. I would like to say that yes, it is true that we have seen this trend over a long period of time, which is why even at Youth by Youth we introduced something that is called allyship. There's this assumption around their decisions, and young people can't really make certain decisions because their realities are different. And I think that it's a very one-sided way to view things, because the truth is that we are always going to have young people. So if young people are saying this is what they want, even when they grow older, when we have younger people, they are still going to want the same thing. So so the concept of allyship is to say, instead of having older people making this decision, how about throughout the entire process, these decisions are made together, like there are intergenerational decisions that have been made. So it's not just really about, I made this decision while I was young, or this decision was made with older people. It's like, this is an intergenerational decision. So meaning, even if it is after 10 years, if this decision is going to change, if this thought process is going to change, it's also going to be intergenerational. I think when we begin to look at our challenges and also look at systems of change, wealth transfer, every of these things in this space as intergenerational, then we'll realize that we'll do more things that are going to test like that are going to stand the test of time. Because imagine a decision is made like intergenerational, the opinions of young people, older, like all generations, really, not just old and young, but really every generation that really matters in that space come together to make certain decisions. And as a leader, I had someone said a very interesting thing earlier, like imagination is listening, right? Decision making and changing the future is also listening, right? So if we can listen to these generations and make decisions based off it, we'll come up with a much more better decision than thinking older people can actually make good decisions. Because my grandpa told me something once, like, you think I know everything, but I'm actually just figuring things out. There's just this assumption that when people get older, then there's the wisdom or there's a knowing that comes with it, right? And actually, many times I just figuring things out. Like, it's just the same design thinking process that it takes a young person to come up with an idea that's going to take the same older person. So if we begin to make more intergenerational decisions, we begin to make better decisions that will serve everybody, because these people with this trust, these philanthropists are older people, right? The young people who want to enjoy like these facilities that in these programs are younger. If we make an intergenerational decision, the older person sees themselves, the younger person sees themselves. So it makes life really better. So I would really ask us to embrace the concept of allyship, right? Meaning younger, all generations, intergenerational collaboration, exploring certain things and making collective decisions together for our collective.
Thanks, Ariolua, for bringing in the idea of intergenerational. Ellie, before we pass to you, I would love, just in that moment when we talked about intergenerational collaboration, intergenerational imagination, as Jordan put in the chat, and talking about changing places, seeing from different angles. I would love to go into a video for a moment, just to allow us to pause. And so Ellie, please hold that thought because we will come back to it. From the forest of imagination, Jordan, you talked about why is a dead tree less, I think you said less valuable than, I can't quite remember what your exact phrasing was. And as soon as you said tree, I thought of forest of imagination. So let's go into a forest of imagination video that puts us in a place of wonder, that puts us in a place of being able to change spaces, as we said, and see from those different angles. And we definitely are looking at something intergenerational. Kieran, are we good to go?
Where are we? What is the time? How far have we wandered? And who will finish our rhymes?
There is this feeling, it's like a rhythm, almost like a piece of music or something that has been put together. So mine is the hoorah as you come in.
How do we represent nature? I mean, there's so many things you could talk about. A story about Bath and its ecology, a story about design and the tension between formality and informality, referencing, nature.
Assembled in the forests this year as an invitation to the whole community to really think about coming together to explore these important themes around nature, imagination and well-being.
So something that is in your head when you go in, you don't have to know what it means. You just have to go in and wonder.
I mean, it's all layered and it's really hard to explain.
When you come into the room, you just feel in a new place. It's nothing that you would have expected walking into the room. So it's nature out of context.
The messy, beavery world, because they create a mess, basically, beavers, to a large extent. But that mess creates really vibrant habitats for many other species.
You have to get down, you have to crawl, and that's what makes it interesting. Then you're transported into another, underworld.
What's our relationship to nature? How does it work in terms of the way we design and create places? We've got that amazing dialogue going on here.
People always think because you have colour, it's for children. I mean, it is just for people, and absolutely for every age.
You come in and you have a new horizon line, you have a new perspective on things.
This wonderful opportunity to contrast this absolutely exquisite crystal symmetrical chandelier with something that's wilder.
This represents a 250-year-old beech tree. What we're doing is honoring the life and the time of this tree, which matches the 250 years of the assembly rooms.
What I'd like is people think about their own relationship with nature, and even in a little way, even on a terrace, even on a balcony, you can have that beautiful way. The bees can come to you if you just you make the effort and put the flowers out there and the things that they like.
Amazing input from lots of people. An incredible sort of generosity really across multiple organizations and individuals to pull it together.
The creative community that comes together to make it happen every year is really special. And you do it because you get to see the schools come in, you get to see the families come in, and you get to see them be transported, and that's a beautiful thing. And it's about the imagination. It's how do you get people thinking differently.
So yeah, I mean, it's an incredibly well organized way of doing something, and unusual. And so at first it's quite hard to navigate because there's lots of different things going on, and you're like, is this all gonna, and then when it comes together you think, wow, that was genius.
We are all connected to the nature, that it's in our DNA, we share this, and when we're in nature, even if we're inside with this nature, there is a connection.
Thank you for that. Just that moment of going back into that space of wonder and back into nature and back into an imaginative space. Give us that energy for this next part of the conversation. Ellie, you had wanted to rebound before we went into there, and I don't know if you went into the Beaver Dome, in the Great Hall under the chandelier, or if you were amongst the grasses, wherever each of you were and whatever energy that gave to you. Come with it into this next part of the conversation and enjoy. Over to you, Ellie.
I always admire that in the world of imagination, we consider what is called the unlikely connections. And so I was going to share that this idea of funding, philanthropy is often in a box, and the importance of looking outside of it. So, have I considered other parts of the world, other geographical spaces that might be grappling with a similar issue and their approach? Likewise, have I considered other sectors, the private sector, business? How have they approached? Are they the cause, or are they a possible solution? Really thinking, what are other issue areas and how are they grappling with their issue, and what can I learn from them? So I think that's where imagination also plays a real practical role of what can I learn from the difference? But then there are common values. And then I would say that through that diversity, we have unity. And so I always say the most important piece in that journey is the why. If we can articulate the why through our imagination, then everyone can come together and dance around the why. And so very often people tell me the what and the how, but the vision comes first.
And a pause. This is what in French is called an ange qui passe, an angel is passing. We have that moment of pause. Francois, you had a question in the chat for Johnson, or did anybody else want to rebound on any of these things? So Johnson, maybe you wanted to respond to Francois's question in the chat?
Sorry, let me take a quick look.
So what is your experience?
Basically, Johnson, the question of intergenerational
right.
taxation,
Yes.
happening, maybe in different families, but I think especially in the kids for SDG families, I think that might be inspiring, because we do know that they have very creative kids and that want to have an impact. And so I wonder, how that changed the conversation in those families.
Well, a lot of the families we work with, they, again, there's the child and their aspirations and dreams and what they want, and then there's the family and the parents coming from a parent's angle, and there's a lot of practical matter from the parents' angle. What kind of job you're going to get, which university you're going to go to, if you focus on this particular path versus that. And what we find is that oftentimes, children, it's mostly mostly a bell curve, right? You have 10% of the kids who are truly motivated. They really know what they want. They're focused, they're passionate about certain topics, and they're self-motivated and driven to pursue those topics, be it how do I reduce forest fires in Indonesia by convincing farmers not to burn down forests to farm, but instead grow bees and become a beekeeper and sell honey that way. So still sustain living, but you know that's there are children like that. But the majority of kids, just like majority of adults, don't know what they want with life. And you ask them, what do you want to do with life? Just like adults, they don't know, which is normal. But a lot of universities require or request that they do. And as a result of, again, playing the game, which is a US university and admissions game, almost all students know that they have to appear in this fashion. So what I find is that you have the bell curve, or some children who really are motivated and know what they want to do. The bulk have no idea what they want to do, and they are putting their hand up and doing projects for SDG because they think that is what's requested of them. In other words, if the rules of the game changed, I would expect a lot of them would not be pursuing such things, and they'll be doing something else. So that's a separate topic of whether the U.S. admissions game makes sense or not, and whether the criteria is reasonable or not. My view is it's not, but that's what I observed. That a lot of it is not self-driven, but family-driven or driven by what's imposed upon them by society. Right? There's 4,000 universities in the United States. People only know about the top 100. Right? And of the top 100, everybody's focused on the top 20, where the admissions rates are 10% or lower. Right? So it's unfortunate, but you see this type of phenomenon. Oh, and then sorry, I have one more thing to add about what we just said. I think it's very important for the imagination to be placed in the right place. What I mean by that is I observe from my investing side, we observe so many interesting venture capital opportunities and technologies throughout the years. And it often is the case that if your efforts and time are put into building a better mousetrap, you may spend years and years in your industry to become the best mousetrap creator. And all of a sudden, overnight, your entire industry is disrupted by something that you didn't even see coming. For example, if you're in a hotel industry and you try to become the best hotel operator in this industry and you never see Airbnb coming, then whatever you do, that's going to disrupt you, and that's going to disrupt you in a big time. I spoke to a lot of Italian coffee companies who, they've always thought themselves as a coffee company. They've never thought that Starbucks can be seen as a coffee company, because Starbucks is far more milk and water and sugar than coffee. But their success, right? They cannot replicate the success of Starbucks. Not even close. So these are examples of you got to think wider. You got to think wider. Otherwise, your entire industry and what you're doing could be replaced and you don't even know, right? My friend, who's a McKinsey partner, just fired her VP because she can now use AI to generate slides 5 minutes per slide, and her VP really just does that. So she can train the GPT to go through data to make sure the data is right, and then she can use AI to generate slides, right? Things are changing really fast. People need to be imaginative in a big way. Don't just keep going down the same rabbit hole. It may not work out in the end.
Erman mentioned on the chat Planetizen, and I'd love to hear more if this is like an antidote to the educational model that we have. Like, I'm curious, Francois, what that looks like and how this is sort of a response to some of these issues.
Well, thanks for the question. So, and for Ermin to mention this. So yesterday we had a fantastic session that Ed organized that was a design session where we invited young people to tell us what sort of university they want for the future of the planet. most universities have a strong history. Actually, you know, the top ranked in every country are usually the oldest in that country. And when you look at this, given that they are not evolving very fast, they are more and more out of touch with, you know, the planetary needs and the new generation needs. So the question is, what if we were to redesign a university in the planetary age with the youth, starting from their needs, and doing it with the backing of UNESCO, United Nations University, and, you know, sort of the planetary institutions that can make a difference? Because, you know, the national universities have co-evolved with the local constraints, and are not taking necessarily into account the planetary needs. And, you know, why is that different into the AI age? And to Johnson's point, you know, it's one of the places that is likely to be disrupted are places of knowledge, because ChatGPT and others have, you know, an ability to adapt knowledge to your very question that, you know, is scalable and you know, still should be optimized, but is already quite impressive. So if you were to redesign, you know, this, and so the idea of planet citizenship, to describe it in a minute, is, you know, the planet citizenship is to the planet what citizenship is to the city, but it's an attempt at going beyond the historical constraints of citizenship and the geographical constraint of citizenship, which, you know, the first citizens were the men in arms defending city walls. So women were not citizens, children are still not citizens, slaves and migrants have never been citizens either. So citizenship has never been inclusive, plus the city walls have separated humans from nature. So it was neither an ecological or a sustainable concept. So if planet citizenship aims to be more inclusive and more ecological, and so if you redefine a university to serve the common good at a planetary level, and you invite students to understand the natural common goods, the cultural common goods, and the digital common goods, and you invite them to nurture them, and they are recognized for creating new goods, then, you know, you instead of competing on yesterday's knowledge on curricula that have been defined nationally, what if you invite them to explore the planetary challenges and co-construct the future together? That's basically, in a nutshell, what the Planetary University is attempting to do.
And on that note, we're coming to the end of our conversation. As we talk about Planetary University, we had a conversation about a year ago about imagination in every classroom, which is a really good starting point, imagination in every classroom, for getting to a point of planetisms everywhere and planetism universities everywhere we can imagine. And so I'd like us to just go back into that conversation with a quick video. And then to wrap up this conversation, give us 1 second, Karen, please. And just to come back in and be able to say thank you to all of you for all that has been put into this space, which has been a really huge conversation with so many different threads. But let's take a look at imagination in every classroom first, and then we'll be back.
It's time to think differently. With 60,000 years of genius and imagination.
Sorry, just...
For you, what is a classroom and where does the imagination, where does it spark?
If you're going to treat a classroom as a place in a school, then you're already putting a limit on it. But if you're going to say a classroom is a place where learning happens, I think that opens up so many more doors. What can a classroom look like?
Imagine if the classroom was the planet.
We work in this group of 5, and we all sit in circles so that we're all like on an equal field. There's no teacher, there's no student, we're peers.
I don't like leaving chairs and tables. I always ask everyone to move it all to the side, and then we have this big area.
Anything they want to do, and like we sit there and we just like talk about just the most fun things, and I think it just gets the kids out of their comfort zone a little bit.
Oh, okay, we're doing something different. Now is the time where we can think. We're not just sitting down and doing as we're told.
And imagine the difference of saying I can instead of can I?
So there's also the non-physical aspect of it, of like creating a safe space. Like, how does the space feel?
The values and the sense of community is probably the most fundamental thing to kind of like awakening imagination. And I think trust is so important and such an, another one of those invisible forces that feeds imagination. If, there's a difference when you're feeding your imagination with love and you're feeding your imagination with fear, and I've worked with young people and they're like, well, why would I answer that question? Nothing's going to change. Nobody's going to listen.
So imagine giving someone the power to imagine a better tomorrow.
That's the biggest thing. How can you get people to start imagining, okay, this is what could be coming. This is what I want to learn about.
I believe kids hold the keys to imagination and we need to tap into their minds more and encourage people to imagine more.
Because once kids want to learn, they will find a way to learn.
Imagination is a core life skill. Just imagine where would we as human beings if we didn't imagine the world that we are in today.
It's the key to ideas and making connections between things. Many of those things are what it really means to be human. Like how do they feed it? How do we free it?
How can you start something? How can you give them like a little piece so that they can imagine the rest? And what piece should that be? How big should that be? How much should you give them?
How do we have less coercion and control in education and more invitations to play with possibility and not try to control the outcomes?
Ed, can I hand over to you for the last word?
Well, it's been a joy kind of listening and seeing how the round table turned into this kind of conversation and almost this like mycelium connecting together. So it's real gratitude to the speakers here today. I think we'll be grabbing a lot of these kind of different knowledge pieces, and we're looking as Francois alluded to as well, in other projects connected to building, new forms of university and education that we've spoken before, not just about, funding financially, but what are all of the possible ways in which we are funding change and imagination in the classroom? What are the resources that we can access? And this has been a really interesting kind of outcome of the festival too. So really, really keen to see where these conversations go moving forward. Huge thank you as well to Ermin for steering the ship so excellently too. And to everybody, I hope you have a great festival and 2024 ahead.
Thank you. I can only repeat all of Ed's thanks. Special thanks to everyone for joining from all of these different time zones and all of these different life situations and different moments in your day. Thanks to Kieran and to Isaac for tech. And thank you all for the patience with some of our tech glitches. This happens. We're trying to do the best to be global at this moment with all of the tech that allows us to do that. And at the same time, sometimes tech takes us hostage. But this was even with those issues, we managed somehow to connect and to get to a place of understanding with each other and hearing each other and seeing each other. And this has been a beautiful, rich conversation. Thank you for your time, your energy, and for sharing, and just for being amazing humans. Thank you. We're going to play out now.
Sorry, and on top of that, I am now having some difficulties. Hey, Isaac, would you be able to play that one out for me? I'm having some issues on my end. Sorry, dude.
Part of the conclusion, or
Kieran, change wouldn't happen without difficulty and challenge.
That's it. That's correct.
Fairly time, brother. Did you have a video that you needed played?
Just the credits, please, Isaac.
No. I am, and I'm not seeing any not seeing any credits here. Did you want to just I think you're still on mute.
Yeah, that's okay. We'll do an edit, and
Alright,
we'll
sweet.
add it right at the end, I think.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks to everyone for being here. Thanks for helping.
Sorry about those issues, guys.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Great conversation.